All right, hey guys, we're going to call Donice Noelle Smith. I think I've said that right. We'll check with her, and just kind of ask her a few questions and see what she's about. All right, let's go ahead and get her on the line.
Hello, this is JC.
Hi, is Donice there?
You bet. He's right here.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, how you doing?
Pretty good, pretty good.
All right. I'm her pet monkey.
Well, hi, pet monkey.
All right. There you go. Put it on.
Okay, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. You working on a speak and spell back there?
No, I was just checking on the computer didn't want to do my spell check.
Oh, I see.
It didn't want to do the spell check. But
Okay,
that's okay. It's all working out now.
perfect.
So anyway,
So I'm here. I've got the computer all set up and it's on record. It's actually currently recording. And just to check with you, we have your permission to record this call, right?
yeah. Do I have permission also to see if I can stop it? The cat. Just a minute. I got a
Sure.
cat that she's clawing at me. She wants my attention. Justin, have you fed the cat? She's upset, and she won't leave me alone. And I'm in the middle of an interview with Roy. Hold on just a minute.
Sure.
See, we get this right in here. You want to get her? Okay.
What kind of
So I
cat?
go with Justin.
What kind of cat do you have?
We have 7 different rescue cats, and she's a Siamese. We inherited my mother's 2 cats when she passed away last September.
Ah.
Okay, so
Okay. So we ready?
here, not yet.
Not yet. Okay. You tell me when we're ready.
Okay. Second. Okay, so I'm going to do this live on Facebook at the same time, okay?
Certainly.
Okay. And what's the title going to be?
Who is Donice Noelle Smith?
Okay.
Right? Because that's what everybody wants to know. Who is this Donice gal on the ballot? And what does she stand for? And why should I vote for her? Those are the questions that people are asking themselves. Inquiring minds want to know.
Okay.
So you just let me know when you're ready.
Now.
Was that now you're ready?
Yes.
Oh, okay, great. So I've got a list of questions here, and they don't have to really be answered in any specific way or order. And it's just to kind of help people figure out who you are and help them to make choices. So I guess
Can you introduce yourself too, please?
can you say that again?
Can you introduce yourself, please?
Absolutely. I'm Roy McCullough. I'm just a nobody. I'm not political. I'm not affiliated with anything. I have a Monday through Friday job driving a truck, and yeah, my boring life. I'm a foster dad. I've got my own kids. I've got foster kids. I've been married for 15 years. I live and work in Oregon. I'm a homeowner, and yeah, I guess just all the basic stuff. All the basic boxes are checked.
Reach out to me how you found out about me.
Honestly, I was looking at my ballot and I saw your name on there, and I'm like, okay, well, if I'm gonna make a wise choice, then I need to know about all of these people on here. So the first ones were easy, and then I'm like, okay, who's this Donice? And I punched it into YouTube, thinking I'd see some sort of a debate or video or something, and crickets. I got nothing. There was nothing on YouTube. I thought, well, that's strange. So I Googled it, and then I had to go through several pages, and I found some older interview that you had had. And yeah, and from there I was able to contact you, and here we are today. So,
Wonderful. That's
so,
great. Well,
so
I'm very pleased that you reached out to me. I even have a young lady who's up, I guess, in the Portland area. She reached out to me, but I've gotten so many prank calls and everything that I was a little bit leery, and so I wrote her back an email, and I guess the teacher was able to pick up from her taking the email into him today, and I had left her my phone number, so the teacher called me. The history teacher of her 8th grade class called me and said, I want you to know she's a real student. She's really in 8th grade. She's doing a project, and she wants to add you to her project. And so I'll be answering a bunch of her questions by email tonight so she can complete her history homework assignment.
oh, nice.
So anyway, go ahead. I'm ready for whatever questions you want to ask me.
Okay, well, let's start with the basics. Can you tell me about your party and how you got to where you are in with the party that you're in today?
Okay. Well, I grew up with the parents who were Republican. My mother said that her parents said they were Republican, but they many times acted other than that. I've told people before that I've known a lot of Democrats that are wonderful people. They were what we call the John F. Kennedy Democrats. You don't see them very much anymore. And I were in the military right out of high school, 2 weeks after high school in 74. I had been on the high school yearbook committee. I was also on the high school journalism newspaper. And that's where I kind of grew into the love of writing. My mother is a professional writer herself. And so I had written for many newspapers over the space of my early, young, and middle adulthood. I have always been a Republican. I have always voted Republican. To me, it was not a question. To me, being conservative was being thoughtful and realizing that we are losing our country. Sometimes I'm a little bit moderate as a Republican, but I'm not compromising. I don't sit on the fence.
Right.
And I had soldiers that were involved in Waco that were asked to do things. They didn't know what they were doing until afterwards they found out what happened, what they were involved in. And a couple of them, I think, committed suicide. That was a wake-up call to me. I knew many of the players in Ruby Ridge. I knew Bo Gritz, who is Green Beret, like my husband now has been. I saw a lot of things happening. I came across people that were involved with the Oklahoma Federal Building who had been there when it happened, who saw things that they weren't supposed to see. Some of them walked away from it alive and basically went into hiding. Others were not so fortunate. That's when I began to realize that there truly was a cabal here in the United States and around the world. And that's when I began to realize that we had some alphabet soup agencies that were nefarious and that were actually working for the deep state for what we call the New World Order. But I pretty much just decided that I was going to do radio. And I was doing international radio as a talk show host, non-paid, as a volunteer, and still writing for newspapers occasionally, raising my kids. I left the military active duty and went into the reserves in boots and also in the National Guard. I've done both over 35 years. And I began to realize more and more that there was something wrong with the Republican Party. It wasn't just the Democrat Party. It was the Republican Party that had serious, serious problems. And I began to realize that absolute power does corrupt absolutely. And that this tit for tat, mudslinging, you're more wrong than I am, and I'm more right than you are, and back and forth. And I began to realize there's something wrong with having three parties. That two of them are the major parties, and you might have a third and a fourth party that are considered the minor parties. A young man taught me today from Texas that he had interviewed a lady back in Michigan who was running for governor, but she was running under what we call the Peace Party. The Peace Party and the Progressive Party and the Green Party to me are the same. They're basically Marxist. Some of them are socialists, but mostly Marxist to communist. And she was running for the Green Party, and she told him, he said, I don't consider ourselves to be a third party or a minor party. When you say that you're a minor party, it's like you're third best. He said, we call ourselves alternative party. So I like that expression, so I'm going to take that on from now on.
Nice.
I got tired. I got tired of watching the people that I worked with, and I helped fundraise, and we busted our butt to try to make certain things happen, only to realize that the Republican Party here in Oregon is a captured operation, just like the Democrat Party is.
I see.
And we had a situation with the governor here when the governor that was in charge at the time, he came back after a few years, and he was caught in some rather dirty dealings, and he had to leave. And Obama had decided to endorse somebody that was a friend of his. She was, I think, the Secretary of State, something. She was very involved with the Democrat Party. Her name is Kate Brown. And so she found herself, being the Secretary of State, able to step right into the position of governor. And that's how it works here in Oregon. We don't have a lieutenant governor. We don't have a separate person who is handling the Department of Education. The governor is in charge of the Department of Education, and I don't like that idea. And I believe that we should change our state constitution to give us the ability to have a lieutenant governor just like other states do. So she stepped into the role. She finished up, we call him Governor K, for short, Cliffhopper. She stepped into his shoes, and she then took off in a direction that was tyrannical, like a dictator. We tried 3 recalls on her. It got so bad at one point that we had all the Democrats and Republicans in the whole state doing this recall. We all rolled up our sleeves, and everybody, whether you were libertarian, whether you were independent, Republican, Democrat, or non-affiliated, we all wanted to get rid of her. She is the most hated governor in the entire United States of America.
Kate
But it
Brown.
doesn't bother her because making $158,000 a year during the last 8 years or so she's been in, she's amassed a wealth of over $200 million. Now, she can only get that from her dealings with people overseas like the Chinese Party. We know she has strong affiliation with them, just as California Governor Newsom does. When basically that recall, the third one, didn't go through because the person in charge of it, who kept insisting he had to be in charge of it, was a man by the name of Solomon Yu and Bill Courier, these 2 gentlemen. Now, I know it sounds like the way I'm explaining it, but I have to give you the backstory. Because just to say I went from the Republican Party to the Constitution Party wouldn't make sense to you if I didn't give you the backstory. Is that okay, Roy?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. So I had lived in Coos Bay. I moved to Douglas County about 20 years ago, and I was very concerned. And while I was in the Republican Party, I had some very loving, supportive people, men and women there. And then I had others that some of them are rhinos and some of them are not. But some of them were extremely jealous, not the men so much, but the women of my background. They could not believe that a woman my age had done everything that I had done in the last 47 years and raised 5 children as a full-time mother. In the military, I learned the organizational skills, the logistical skills. So when my kids were in school during the day, I was in school during the day or working part-time. When they came home, I was already home. I made sure they did their homework, their rooms were clean, we had dinner, and they were off to bed, and I didn't leave the house until after they left the house, and I was back when they got back. The only time that was different was maybe 1 week in a month when I did my reserve on my National Guard, because I left active duty because I figured if I'm going to be a full-time mother and a wife, then I need to do that. And I could still have my cake and eat it too by going to school part-time or working part-time and still improving myself. So I did that until my 5 kids were all grown, and then I went back active duty again. I have 4 sons and a daughter. Their ages 29, 34, 35, 44, and 45. The oldest one, my son, is a middle school teacher of 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And unfortunately, my only daughter and my son have basically, due to society and manipulations, have decided that they want to take a different path politically. And that's okay, because I raised them to be independent thinkers. Unfortunately, what's happening with our society nowadays is too many people are playing along to get along. And if you want to keep your job as a teacher, you have to join the teachers' union. You join the teachers' union, then you end up finding yourself having to deal with play along to get along and dealing with the progressives. If you want to keep your job, if you want to get the pay increases, you better act the Democrat part, be the Democrat. And to me, that's a very sad commentary. I saw it happen with my mother, who was a Christian woman, a Republican, and she ended up teaching 40 years at a junior college, and she ended up becoming a Democrat, but the kind of Democrat that's not willing to listen to the other side. And fortunately, there's a group here in Oregon that I found out about the other day when I was in Klamath Falls on the campaign trail from a good friend of mine, and she said that she's part of this group. I think it's called Braver Angels, and it's a group of Democrats and Republicans that get together on a regular basis and try to discuss things and work things out and find commonality, find common ground that they can agree on. So there's none of this horrible infighting that's going on, the tit for tat, the mudslinging and the rest of it. So when I found that Solomon Yu, who came from China, he was brought here by someone who's one of the heads of the World Economic Forum, where they believe, and they're telling us now, that by the year 2030, which is 8 years from now, you will own nothing, you will have nothing, and you will be happy.
I've heard that, yeah.
They're turning us into, or trying to turn us into mindless robots. And so when I saw that Solomon Yu, with my research, because I've been a freelance reporter and investigative reporter, when I saw that Solomon Yu had been brought here about 25 to 30 years ago and was mentored by this man and gets up and tells people, well, my parents and trying to escape communist China and, what a great guy I am. And then I found out his background. I found out that once he got here to Oregon, and he ended up taking over the Republican Party, which I think was his mission, sort of like a Manchurian candidate. He ended up taking control of the Republican Party. He then had a guy by the name of Bill Courier, who was his sidekick, and they were the ones that were actually keeping the third recall from never being turned in. They did this numerous times. They got mad if other patriots tried to do recalls of their own and said, no, we need to be the only one. We want the credit. We want to be the only one. So we worked so hard to get that third recall on Kate Brown because she was a dictator. She was violating the Oregon Constitution. She was violating the U.S. Constitution, and especially in 2019, 2020, 2021, with the closing down the whole state, closing down our schools, attacking our churches, having people fired through the Oregon Health Authority, which has too much power, basically locking people up in their homes. And the suicide rate among children age 10 and above went up. The depression in the state of Oregon, as you probably saw yourself, it was just horrific what I saw going on. And I'm a nurse. I used to work as a psychiatric nurse and drug alcohol abuse, both in and out of the military. So when I saw what happened, and then what happened in 2020, and I see that Christine Drazen said that Biden is the rightful president, and yet she didn't go back, even though she was invited, to go back to the Election Integrity Conference in Kansas. My husband and I spent $800 apiece for round-trip tickets, and we went back to Kansas, and we were there for the Election Integrity Conference, where we met with Laura Logan, who's a friend of mine. Laura Logan has no agenda. You've probably heard of her. She had been a reporter back in the sandbox, back in the Iraqi-Afghanistan times. She came through some very horrific situations. She now lives in Texas, and she is a spokesperson for trying to save America, for people working grassroots up, starting in their communities. I came back from that, and I just knew we were in so much trouble. It was worse than I thought it was. And, of course, I met Patrick Byron back there. He and I may be related to common ancestors maybe up in Canada. And he gave a speech. He's the one that was involved with, and the head of Overstock.com. And we met with Juan O'Savin, who is a white hat, who had been in the military himself, and is somebody that's been dealing a lot with what has been happening. He's been kind of giving us heads up for certain things happening. He's been dealing with a lot of things that have been happening behind the scenes. These are the people that are sometimes the unsung heroes. And I came back, and I was fed up. I was fed up with the May 2022 election. As you know, we had some very good candidates, Mark Selman, and we had Bob. Bob is 28 years, retired Navy. He's a lawyer. He's been involved with Grocery Outlet. He was one of the high CEOs. Both of these were good men. Mark Selman had been a superintendent of schools just north of me. And we believe that that election was selected, not elected. Solomon Yu had an awful lot to do with his friend Carrie McQuestion out of Baker City. She'd been the mayor in Baker City. The one good thing she did was stand up against the mask mandate. But she and her mother, Susan Ellis Jones, pulled some really stingings on the people in Baker City and in that county. And the people who are the PCPs of the Republican Party said, we've had enough. We have had enough of Solomon Yu, his influence on the Republican Party, and we, the PCPs, are setting the example for the rest of the PCPs in the Republican Party of Oregon that the Republican Party has been a captured operation for 30 years, ever since Solomon Yu showed up, and we're going to take back our state, one county at a time. And they've shown us how it's done, but it could take many years. I may not be able to live long enough. I had one person today tell me, who is former Marine Corps, that it could be 30, 40, 50 years. We won't even be alive that long to see that happen. And I want to make sure I can make a difference. And when I saw that the Republican Party was ignoring many of us that have the skills, the leadership, the talent to bring to the table, that we want to continue to serve, that we understand that we would be the servants to Oregonians, and the Republican Party is ignoring us because they like the status quo, especially the old Republican establishment, the old businessmen who are making a lot of money with keeping things like treading water. So I didn't leave, Roy. I didn't leave the Republican Party. They left me. I didn't abandon them. They abandoned me. I have still gone to some of their fundraisers. I have still contributed in small ways and large ways. Two of my family members have left the Republican Party, and they were PCPs, and they came and joined me in the Constitution Party. I've asked other family members to stay in the Republican Party unless they choose that they want to come to the Constitution Party. I didn't tell any of my 4 sons and my daughter to join the military. I left it up to them. But I told them what the good, the bad, and the ugly is of today's military. And they had to make that choice. I do have one nephew that has joined the Air Force, and right now he's in an Air Force academy. But I raised my kids to think for themselves, to think outside the box. They were raised part-time in public schools, part-time homeschooled, full-time homeschooled, and then they were raised back in full-time private school, and then near the very end of their high school career, they went back to public school. And they were good boys, the 3 youngest ones especially. They are contributing members of their community. They are very involved with many volunteer activities. And I can say that I'm very proud of them. The credit goes to them. We parents need to set the example, and I had to set the example. I couldn't sit on the fence any longer and let the Republican Party say, oh, it's nice that you're helping us fundraise and you're doing this and that, but, just sit there and be quiet, put up and shut up. And that's not me. I can't do that. When I see there's a wrong, I'm going to say if there's a wrong and let the chips fall where they may. So I decided to go to the Constitution Party on May 27th. I was actually introduced to them on the 21st to the people there. Many of them wanted to consider me for their nomination for governor. There was 5 or 6 or 7 of us in the running. And on the 27th, I was officially a member of the Constitution Party. I was told I could stay in the Republican Party and still get their endorsement for governor. But I didn't think that was right because Christine Drazen had been selected by the Republican Party rather than Mark and Bob actually being elected beautifully. Each one of them would have been an excellent governor. And she is a very pretty woman and very cute smile, but she doesn't have any backbone. I like her. I can't say that I don't like her. I've met her a couple of times, and she's a very nice person, but nice doesn't cut it when you're the governor. You need to have, as my friend Misty said, you need to have a backbone where the wishbone is. And she has a wishbone. She always in the legislature voted the way the Democrats wanted her to. She played along to get along. And to me, I can't do that. That's like being half pregnant or sitting on the fence. You either need to stand for what you believe in and believe what you stand for, or get out of the way, okay? Yeah. And my friend Robert LaVoy Finnegan, before he was assassinated under the orders of Kate Brown, our governor, with the help of the FBI, the crooked FBI, they're not all that way, and some of the state troopers, some of them are really good, others are not so, that he said to me 4 days before he was cut down, I visited him briefly for a Constitution class in Harney County. I was up there to see Chris Ann Hall and listen to her speak. Her husband is also the same name as my husband, and I missed her talking because we got caught in a snow blizzard. We got up there, it was already closed down. The fairgrounds closed up. She was done speaking. So we got to meet Robert LaVoy Finnegan. We came back the next day. We sat in on a 2-hour class taught by him and Ammon Bundy, Ryan Bundy, and Ryan Payne, and Shauna Cox. And Robert LaVoy Finnegan turned to me when he learned about some property we owned, and he said to us what he would do when this whole situation was over. And he's told us many times, you have to stand for what you believe in, Roy, and you have to believe in what you're standing for, and it matters how you stand. No matter what happens, you need to take a stand. No matter what the pressure, the fear porn, the manipulations, the coercion, the blackmail, the bribery, you need to take a stand. And you cannot be blamed for how it's going to go. It's going to happen how it's going to happen. By hook or crook, this election will probably be another election that's been stolen. We haven't gotten rid of the Dominion machines. We're still doing mail-in balloting. Too many people are lazy. They don't want to hand deliver it down on election day. And so whatever happens is going to happen. But I'm not splitting the vote any more than, well, people have actually told me that Betsy Johnson and Christine Drazen are splitting the vote. Betsy was a Democrat. She is a Democrat. She didn't get the nomination, so she's running unaffiliated. And then Tina Kotek is like Kate Brown on steroids. Somebody I know, the only thing I do agree with him on, it's like, oh my gosh, it's like Kate Brown 201 if Tina Kotek gets in. People are terrified. And so, of course, they are threatening people who are trying to run in the same election. And I told people, I said, when I came to the Constitution Party, I came to be a county chair. I had no idea that I was going to be here. I was wanting one day to run for county commissioner. Unfortunately, we have 3 county commissioners that a lot of businessmen in the area now don't like and they don't trust because they've seen the pattern. For some people, that kind of power goes to their head and they start doing things that they should not be doing. So I hope that explains to you a long-about way why I am in the Constitution Party. I consider myself a constitutional Republican in the Constitution Party. All of us are pretty much have the Republican values. Most all of us are Christian and or spiritual. Some of them are more religious than others. I don't consider myself religious. I consider myself spiritual. There's a difference. And I'm continuing to grow in my spiritual growth. I believe in the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And I also believe in the prayers I was taught by my godmother, who is Lutheran. It's God grant me the serenity to accept those things that I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And so in my belief system, I believe that we are not puppets at the end of a string, that we have free will, but at the same time, we have to be able to take a stand and I'm going to let go and let God. So, next question.
Okay, real quick, what's your age? I never caught that. If you don't mind me asking.
Doesn't matter, but I'm
It
not
doesn't
afraid
really.
of admitting what my age is. I was born in 1955, the year that Walt Disney first opened up Disneyland in Los Angeles, and I have one of the humble honors to have been born on September 17th, which is U.S. Constitution Day. So it's very interesting that being born on September 17th, 1955, U.S. Constitution Day, that when I went in the military, I took an oath to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And I always thought about it, about the Russians, the Chinese, and, those in Iran. I didn't realize until I was a little bit older and my kids were in their teen years that we're actually dealing with domestic enemies right here in the U.S. Many of them home sons, born here, not naturalized, who really don't care about their own countrymen. They care about power, money, prestige, and with that they want more power and more prestige. And they really don't care about the middle class, and they certainly don't care about those that are less than the middle class that are poverty. In fact, they're keeping them in poverty many times because they believe that being the nanny state, they have more control. You control the food, you control the people.
I've heard that. So you and let's see. Next question I want to go into was you've got some official schooling in the Constitution. You took some classes there, or what were you saying about that?
I did a little bit of study on Hillsdale College. I subscribe to their newsletter that comes out. I'm also a strong supporter on the Prager University. I received an AA degree from Leeward Community College in Hawaii. That's under the University of Hawaii. I ended up attending classes through the University of Maryland, San Jose State University, Diablo Valley College when I was stationed in California. Diablo Valley College is a junior college. It's the one my mother taught at for 40 years. I ended up coming up to Northern California where I was stationed there, and I ended up going to Sierra College. And then I came up to Oregon and was stationed here in Oregon. This is where a lot of my ancestors are from. And I settled back here in Oregon. And they said that my AA degree was too old, and if I wanted my RN, I needed to take my LVN, and I needed to be able to take some additional classes to get into the RN program. While I was at Umpqua Community College, I got an Associate of Science degree, and I also received at the same time when I walked an AAOT, which is higher than an associate's or AA degree. It's called an Associates of Arts Oregon Transfer, which means they have to accept everything that you've done up to that point. I took both the AS degree and the AAOT from Umpqua Community College, and I ended up signing up and becoming a student of Eastern Oregon University, which is out of La Grande. I studied history and the Constitution, and I minored in English and creative writing because I am a professional writer. And I ended up graduating from there in 2015 as an older, non-traditional student.
I see. Nice. So that leads me to my next question. As a constitutionalist, how do you feel about the Second Amendment, about guns?
So in the military, we're trained you're not allowed to call them guns or you're end up kissing the ground. And I mean doing push-ups with their foot in the center of your back and pushing you into the ground, and you have to push up under it. So you learn very quickly not to use the word guns. You use the word weapons. But for the sake of civilians here, let's call them guns. To me,
Okay.
For some people, it's a lot softer word. When I first started out, if I'm honest, and I'm a very honest person, when I first started out in the military, I had no problem. We had to qualify once a year on the M16, and I was also a range medic, so sometimes we couldn't open up the qualifying range for either the enlisted to do their M16 or for the officers to qualify on their 9mm. So I was both the range medic, standing by in an ambulance just in case, and then I also had to take time to qualify as well. So I really didn't think about it too much, and then I started having children. And I have relatives who will tell you I was really anal about not having guns around the house. that I learned very quickly that it's not the guns that are the problem, it's the person behind them. It's not the guns that kill people, it's the people behind them that do that. The gun is a tool. Whether you want to use it for sport, target practice, and we have some women that are expert marksmanship here in the United States and have come away with very many medals from that, or for hunting, and then also for protection. And when I married my husband about 21 years ago, he and his father sat down and they explained to me again, this is what you do. If you have a gun that you've been cleaning and you have happened to leave it in your bedroom on the bed, and your nephew comes over, he's going to be taught that if he walks in to use the restroom or do something, and he sees something on the couch or sees something on the table, maybe he stopped by unexpectedly or was dropped off for you to babysit, they're supposed to immediately come and report to an adult member that there's a gun on the table or there's a gun on the bed. Parents and grandparents need to understand that just that one moment of lack of attention to detail, as we call it in the military, can be very deadly. So when you're cleaning a weapon and before you put it away, you need to make sure that you go through the checks and balances to make sure that the safety is on and everything's done that should be done. First of all, children do not belong in their parents' bedroom or their grandparents' bedroom, period. Okay? And they should be taught that from a very young age. You don't go in your parents' or grandparents' bedroom. You don't go in your aunt's or uncle's bedroom if you're not invited. So that needs to be a consistent, that needs to be a standard, okay? I believe the Second Amendment was placed there by our founding fathers to protect us from a tyrannical government. Now, when people can say, oh, that wouldn't happen, our government would never do that to us, excuse me? That's what the people in Venezuela thought. That's what the people in Germany thought even back in World War II. So in World War II, just before World War II, in the 30s, Hitler was taking over. You need to study your history. Hitler was taking over. And the first thing he did was, and he was part Jewish himself. A lot of people don't know that. He wanted to go to an art school that was held by some Jewish people that were very high up there. And he was not accepted in this art school. And so he decided to take his revenge. What he did was he made sure everybody's guns were taken away from them. And then anybody who lived out in the country, where you're more independent, you're more self-sufficient, can't have that, right, in society. So you would have yourself taken out of the country, your homes taken away from you. There's a beautiful musical that is about a Jewish family being removed from their village, and they're being sent to other places to live. They're no longer allowed to live in their village. And they were taken away and they were put in the cities, in apartment high-rises, and in what I call ticky-tacky apartments, where sometimes 2 or 3 families would be crammed in together. And then we've all heard of the Night of Glass. The Nazis, the SS, would come at 2 or 3 in the morning when you're most vulnerable, when you're coming out of a deep sleep, and they would start grabbing people and taking them and throwing them in the trucks and taking them to the train stations and sending them away to the concentration camp. People said that the Holocaust never happened, but it did. And it wasn't just 6 million Jews. It was a combination of Jews and gypsies and Christians and missionaries and people that were gay and lesbian. So it was a whole range of people that were taken away to the concentration camps. It wasn't just the Jewish people. And so we have to learn a lesson from that, okay? That when you have a tyrannical government that feels there's too many people to control, they want to start a process of what we call selecting the herd or culling the herd, okay? In Venezuela, in 2012, they took away everybody's guns. By 2019, the country that was one of the most prosperous, if not the most prosperous country in the world, is now worse than some of the worst countries you can imagine. In Australia, a few years ago, they took away everybody's guns. A few people refused to surrender their guns. The original guy from the real Crocodile Dundee that the movie was patterned after said he wasn't going to give up his quote-unquote Second Amendment. And so basically they filled his house and him like with cheese, like what they did to the car that LaVoy Finnegan was driving Shauna Cox and the 17-year-old girl and Ryan Bundy and Ryan Payne in. They turned it into Swiss cheese. They Bonnie and Clyded the car, and the car is now being hidden by the sheriff's department in Disputes County because they don't want people to see. They won't even let Jeanette Finnegan see her husband's car. So when you see what happened in Australia 2 years ago, they were rounding up all the children, and they were taking the children to one main center. The parents and grandparents had to stay outside, and the children were taken in and given these jabs. There was no informed consent. There was no saying no. You had to comply. If you didn't comply, you were taken off to something similar to concentration camps, and you were kept there. These camps were for adults primarily, but the children were rounded up, and some parents were reporting to us that when their children didn't come out the other end after 2 hours, they find out later that their child had died right there in the room within seconds of getting the shot. This is something the news media is suppressing. They don't want you to hear about this. The children, or they would be taken by ambulance out the back door, and the parents would find out later that their children had died. Some cases they were blackmailed, threatened, coerced, or bribed to not speak to the media, even under threat of going to these concentration camps that are set up all over Australia. So this is just a good example. You think if it doesn't happen in Germany, World War II, it happened in 2012 in Venezuela, it happened recently in Australia, it could happen here too. So the Second Amendment was put there by our founding fathers to assure that we could defend ourselves against a tyrannical government that might be growing out of control. We need limited government. The Japanese said the reason they did not invade in World War II is they knew there was a gun behind every blade of grass here in the U.S.
Yeah, I've heard that before. I've heard that. So, wow. Moving down the list, I've got to get some of these other questions out of the way. As governor of Oregon, how would you deal with the homeless camps?
Well, first of all, there should be no excuse for homelessness in this country, one of the most prosperous countries in the world, okay? What has happened is the liberal Democrats, not the walkaway Democrats that I admire so much, or the John F. Kennedy Democrats, which are now few and far between, they have deliberately kept our society and many of its people basically in a situation what I call the nanny state. Keep them on poverty, keep them on food stamps, keep them dependent. Human nature as it is, if you don't give anybody an incentive to go to work and stand on their own 2 feet, they will just sit there and collect what they think are freebies. Nothing's free. It's costing our entire society. So the homeless camps have been created because of people controlling our economy, keeping certain things down and depressed, making sure that certain jobs go away. And you control the people, you control the food, you control the people. So what we have seen happen is the Democrat Party over the last 40, 50 years have been actually very racist. They were the party that got started after the Civil War, and they didn't want to let blacks vote. The Democrat Party, if you see it, Hillary's America by Dinesh D'Souza, Hillary's America shows the history of the Democrat Party keeping the black population suppressed and down. In the 20s, they did the same thing with segregation, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, and the 60s. What they finally decided, let's turn this around and let the black people think that we are in their corner and we're for them. They will then vote Democrat. All we have to do is offer them free this and offer them free that. As a result of that now, we have homelessness like we've never had before. With homelessness, you end up with mental illness in the streets, increasing. With the mental illness in the streets, you end up with drug and alcohol addiction. Even worse, because they want to numb the pain and the loneliness. When Measure 110 got passed, it was the worst thing that ever happened, because now people are taking heroin and cocaine with no fear of what it could do to their body or any repercussions at all. With homelessness, we've seen these 3 women. All 3 have been in the legislature. One of them over 20 years. One of them has been there for many years, and the other one in 2019, who is basically saying she's a conservative and that she will deal with homelessness like the other 2 are saying. Well, where have you 3 women been for the last, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 22 years? You had plenty of money coming in to deal with homelessness. Where did the money go? Where did the money go that was supposed to deal with the mental illness in the streets? Did it go in someone's pocket? Did it go into a general fund? Where did it go? We should not have the homelessness that we have now. Now, right now, Portland is like a hellhole because George Soros and his shell companies basically brought Antifa and Black Lives Matter in to disrupt things in Portland. Portland burned. Many of the buildings are boarded up, 3 stories up, by cardboard or by, plyboard, and the businesses have gone. People are pouring out of the city and moving elsewhere. And so this is great. It's free for the taking for the Communist Party to come in and not just be purchasing land in Utah, in Idaho, and around where they're building even the little cities. The Chinese right now have at least 100, if not more, police stations in Manhattan and New York. Why is Biden allowing the Communist Chinese Party to have over 100 police stations in Manhattan and New York? And they're planning to spread these Communist Chinese police stations across the U.S. So what I would do is say you will not sell any of our inner city properties, even if it's depressed. You will not sell it to outsiders that are not American citizens, born and raised here, or naturalized. You will make sure that these buildings are retrofitted, they're cleaned up, and then we're going to turn them into low-income, subsidized housing with proper maintenance and proper care, and make sure that we have groups that are dealing with mental illness and the drug addiction. We should not have all these empty businesses and buildings throughout Portland and even Salem. And we have too many people, even in Eastern Oregon, that are homeless. People ask me today, are you telling me there are homeless in Eastern Oregon? Yes, there are. In Harney County, in Wallowa, we have a lot of homeless people. You drive down some of the highways and byways, and they're living in tents right alongside the freeway. And if you know anything about Eastern Oregon, the snow is going to get very deep here pretty soon. So I believe that as governor, I know how to deal with this. I've dealt with homelessness before. I've been a psychiatric nurse. I've dealt with drug and alcohol abuse. I've been fighting the child trafficking up and down the I-5 corridor. I have the skills that the other 3 women don't have. And I'm concerned that one of them, if she does beat out the 2 Democrats, she'll end up swinging more and more to the left because she's going to want to run again. And she's already been voting many of the policies that the Democrats wanted her to vote. I'm sorry, but she's a rhino.
Do you, would you say that I'm assuming you're not with the defund the police side, right?
Well, there's a word, I'm a lady, I can't use it, but it's 4 letters, starts with H and ends with hell. And L, like in Lima, like in Lincoln. No, I do not believe in defunding the police.
Right.
I think it was a travesty what happened, and all 3 women supported defunding the police, especially the one that says that she's conservative. She's now saying, you vote for me as governor, I'll make sure the police get all the funding they want. Well, why did you defund the police not very long ago? If you hadn't have done that, Ted Wheeler would not have gotten away, even though he was the head of the police, not just the mayor, that he wouldn't have gotten away with having the police have to stand down. We lost some really good law enforcement officers. I have a law enforcement background. My husband has even a larger law enforcement background, and we are very supportive of our police. People don't appreciate what they go through. There's an awful lot of stress. The spouses, whether a husband or wife, doesn't know if their loved one is going to come home from working the streets that night. You never know if you're going to get that phone call. The job doesn't just stay at work. You bring it home with you. You're only human. And unfortunately, we have some people that are having to go through counseling because they bring it home, and it affects the family.
I couldn't do it.
We know there is alcohol and drug concerns going on within law enforcement and in the fire departments and elsewhere. And it's because we are not taking better care of our police. We're not taking better care of our fire departments and our EMTs and our paramedics. Many of them are being told to do things that goes against the grain of who they are. And when they were being forced to take these jabs, experimental drugs, or else lose their jobs, no, the police need to be honored and respected. We need to put on the side of the car again to protect and serve. We need to stand back to back and side to side, not take law into our own hands but be the eyes and ears to report to our law enforcement when we see something going on that maybe should not be going on or is nefarious. So I believe we need to give more money to our police, our law enforcement, to our state troopers, and we need to make sure that they remember their oath of office, that they are there to protect and to serve. They are the servants of we the people. Just like I, as governor, would be the servant of the people.
Right. For sure. Okay. Taxpayer dollars for out-of-state abortions.
Ooh.
What? I figured this would be a trigger point for you here, so I'll let you go ahead with that one. What are your thoughts?
Because I was asked that today. I was up in Salem. I was given a 30-minute radio interview in a live studio, and I'm going to give you the same answer I gave them because it's what I feel from my heart, from my soul. As a nurse, I've seen a lot, and I was asked to participate in some things that I could not, and so I either walked away from those jobs or a couple jobs I said, no, I won't do that, and I got fired. And I only lost one job that way, getting fired because I wouldn't do something that basically, in my book, went against my morals and my values and my principles. At the end of the day, I have to face myself in the mirror. And that's why I'm running for governor, and people have tried to get me to quit, to stop, because they say that I could be taking votes away from somebody else and assuring that somebody else would be in office. Well, where have you guys been the last 30 years? Don't lay on me what might happen in a week from now when you guys have been asleep at the wheel for the last 30 years and shrugging your shoulders whenever I said we had to get rid of certain people that were destroying the state. And you all said, well, I don't know. What can we do about it? You can't fight City Hall. Well, when it comes to the abortion issue, oh, wow. Well, I'm a nurse, okay? So let me kind of approach it from that viewpoint. Forget for a moment that I've had 5 kids, and let's just look at it from a very practical, okay? I believe life is life. Now, for those of you, whether you believe that the heart starts beating, within the first 2 weeks or the first week and a half or the first 6 weeks, it's not just a blob of skin. There is an electrical occurrence that takes place when the sperm meets the egg. It's almost like a little atom bomb is going off inside the woman's womb, okay? And that is when life begins. But at that point, the nervous system hasn't been created. The heart hasn't started beating yet. It's still cells that are, basically dividing and subdividing and dividing. So you need to go back and tell the liberals and the women who say, my body, my choice, okay, look at that point of when the conception. Some women know that they conceive that night. Believe it or not, they can just tell. But if your monthly visitor doesn't show up after 4 weeks, and definitely after 6 weeks, then you have not very much time to either talk to your doctor, talk to your minister, talk to your partner if you have a partner or someone who's going to stand by you, and family members, but not use abortion as a method of birth control. That's where I draw the line. There are women out there that will not use contraception, or they get up in the heat of the passion of the moment, and so does the man, and the man goes, well, I don't want to put a condom on me because it doesn't feel the same. Well, excuse me, if you're going to play, then you're going to have to pay. So if you don't use the condom, and she's not also using birth control, it takes 2 of you. Okay, both of you should be using birth control. The chances of getting pregnant then is very unlikely, okay, and especially if you use birth control properly. People need to be taught how to use birth control. And many people say, well, in the heat of the passion of the moment, I forgot. There's no excuse for that, okay? So a lot of these women are saying that they want to do this because it's going to interfere with their careers. It's going to interfere with their schooling. They decide they don't like the man and they don't want to have a baby and either raise the baby and get stretch marks, or they don't want to give the baby to the father or have him have a choice, or to his family, okay? Or she doesn't want people to know that, that she got pregnant. So therefore, it's much easier to tell herself in her mind, it's just a blob of skin. Well, my feeling is that if you're going to do something like that, and you even suspect that you might be pregnant in the first few weeks, then you need to make some hard decisions. If you know after a night of passion that, oh my gosh, one or both of us didn't use birth control, there is a way very easy with today's society to go down and get the morning after pill. For a woman to go and carry that baby for 2 months, 3 months, now the nervous system is developing, the heart's beating, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, now the baby's kicking inside of you. And, you can actually play with the baby by pushing his little foot and he moves it around or she moves it around. To turn around and decide when you're 5, 6, 7, 8 months pregnant to abort that baby, I won't go into the graphic details here because I don't know who's listening, but it is something like out of a Halloween movie, okay? It's grotesque, it's nightmarish, and removing that baby by DNC or by other methods of abortion is basically torturing that baby to death and taking the baby out in pieces. And I'm going to tell you right now, to me, that is outright murder. And some of these women are waiting till the 9th month of pregnancy and then saying, I don't want the baby and I don't want to give it up for adoption, because what happens if through 23andMe or some other method of technology, that child grows up and has a wonderful home raising them, but they get curious and they come knocking on my door someday and they find me. And I'm happily married, and I never told my spouse that I gave a baby up for adoption, never told my biological children they have a half-brother or sister out there. So it's all based on ego and selfishness. So if you're going to get pregnant, you better decide in the first few hours, the first few weeks, what you're going to do. To me, life is life. When women are coming from out of state to this very blue Oregon, and we are paying for their housing, their food, in some cases they're single mothers bringing their babies and children with them, so we're giving them free child care. It's not free, Roy. We, the taxpayers, are paying for their abortions. We're paying for their transportation. We're paying for their food. We're paying sometimes for their child care. And we're paying for their aftercare, whether it's hotels, whether it's B&Bs, it doesn't matter. Taxpayers should not have to pay for that. And for those of us that are religious, or those that are spiritual, or both, we should not be forced to go against our morals, our principles, our values, to see that the money that we have earned by the sweat of our brow, whether you get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to be a farmer and putting food on the table of your community, whether you are a minister who's preaching to a church, whether you are a doctor or a nurse that's trying to save life, our taxpayer dollars should not go to pay because somebody else was either careless or lazy. And something that is actually, we are co-conspirators in murder. So now I think you know how I feel about out-of-state abortion.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And thank you for sharing that. I think there's a lot of us who feel and who share those same views with you on those topics.
And let women tell me that I betrayed my female gender. I have not. I myself had 2 spontaneous miscarriages before I had my first of my 5 children. And, that alone in itself is traumatic. And when a woman turns around and she loses her child, whether it's by her own decision or whether it was something spontaneous like in my case, it stays with you forever, okay? And if somebody forces you to go through an abortion or a DNC, that stays with you forever as well. And my feeling is now, let me say something here, Roy, because this is really important I get this out. There's a little girl, and a lot of men are for abortion because the men are selfish. They're saying, I want my girlfriend to have an abortion. I want my wife to have an abortion because I don't want to be responsible for child support in years down the line. So the men who are supporting abortions, late-term abortions, they are co-conspirators in murder as well because they're also doing this for selfish reasons, okay? They don't want to pay after they got to play, okay? But if you get a little girl, and now little girls are having their monthly visitor as young as 10 and 11 years old. I don't know if you're aware of that, okay? So let's say a little girl has had her monthly visitor start. She's 10, 11, 12, even 13 years old. And let's say she gets pregnant due to a relative, a family friend, a neighbor, or it's incest. because we know there's fathers and grandfathers and uncles out there and even older brothers that are mentally ill enough to expose a precious little girl, okay? I believe that if that little girl aged 10 to 13, and I kind of draw the line at 13, if that little girl from 10 to 13 gets pregnant in any of those ways by rape or molestation or incest, I believe that she should be able to, with the guidance and the knowledge of her mother or grandmother or significant other relatives, should be able to go down and have that taken care of. That is the one thing that the Constitution Party, some agree with me on this, some don't agree with me on this. But we all agree that especially if a woman of any age has an having a hard time pronouncing it, pregnancy, which means that the baby was conceived and is developing in the fallopian tube. That is a death sentence for the mother. That is definitely a case right there. You need to do something, okay? So the case of incest and molestation and rape, in the case of a 10 to a 13-year-old, yes. On the other hand, it's kind of one of those gray areas, Roy, because what happens if you have a 14 or 15-year-old girl that gets raped and she carries the pregnancy, and then she is told, you know, listen, you get to finish high school, you've got your life ahead of you, give the baby up for adoption. It's going to be hard emotionally on that 14 to that 18-year-old girl to know that she gave her baby up for adoption, and which is an act of love. It is. Adoption, giving a baby to a childless couple that can't have children, is a sacrifice and an act of love. It's loving that baby into the arms of another couple that can afford to take care of it. But the child also, aged 14 to 18, needs to have counseling and therapy to be able to come to the resolution that she did a godly thing, that she did a loving thing. And so we need to make sure those young women have the sort of counseling. With Planned Parenthood, they're aborting women who are 18, 20, 21, 25, 30, 40 years of age. And these women are not getting the counseling. So when Planned Parenthood said we are there for women's reproductive freedom and for their health care, no, you are an abortion mill. You are making billions of dollars out of killing babies. It started with Margaret Sanger, who was working in conjunction with Bill Gates' father. Bill Gates and his whole family are eugenists. They believe in termination of life. And Margaret Sanger was a racist against black people, and she wanted to reduce the population of blacks. That is how Planned Parenthood started. And you go back and you study her and you look at her comments. She hated the blacks, and she used the black population. We've seen the black American population used over the last 50 to 60 years and manipulated in every which way, including politically. And that's why Dr. Ben Carlson and Candace Owens are my heroes. And I look at people like Carrie Lake in Arizona. God bless her. She's standing against the tides. All three of them are. And they're saying, you know what? We are going to, if the pot's black, we're going to call it black. If the kettle's black, we're going to call it black. There's none of this being, you know, halfway pregnant or sitting on the fence or being flip-flopping back and forth out of water like a fish out of water. We're going to take a stand, like LaVoy said, it matters how you stand. So no, young girls that young, that is where we should be able to make into consideration, case-by-case basis.
I see. Since we're talking about kids, I'm going to go to the next question here. The kids who have fallen behind during the pandemic, do you have any ideas for a solution on how we would help the children of Oregon to catch up with that?
Yes, I do. I have one of those unique abilities to be able to kind of see into the future what it can be. Mm-hmm. And I don't take no for an answer. Excuse me a minute. And so I'm going to be real here. I came from a family of farmers and ranchers, medical personnel, firefighters. My mother was a teacher for many years as a high school teacher, and as a substitute teacher, even for kids that were in the hospital. She would go to the hospital and work with them. I watched her late into the night 11 o'clock, midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, correcting papers. When she was a single mother with 5 of us kids, she would teach piano lessons to supplement our income. We were very poor. We grew up in poverty, okay? And yet she was putting herself through school, got her AA degree, got her bachelor's degree, and then once I moved out of the house, she got her master's degree. She got a double master's, criminal psychology, and a master's in English and creative writing. I learned by watching my mother, and now my oldest son is a middle school teacher, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade of a public school, and he corrects papers too. Many of the teachers here in Oregon, and not just here in Oregon, okay, have over time become captured. If you go back and you look at the 10 planks of the Communist Manifesto, Marx basically said we're not going to have to shoot fire shots. What you do is you take over the education system, and you take over the transportation system, you take over the banking system, you take over the religious, basically, theology. And one by one, we've seen this happen. All 10 planks are now firmly in place. The transportation system. With the education system, they decided many years ago what they were going to do is have people that were pretending they really cared about our society and where we were going, but they didn't want people thinking outside the box. So they started infiltrating the teachers' colleges, teaching them in a very subtle way the Marxist communist agenda. You cannot have communism without socialism. We're already there. Socialism is the prerequisite to communism, the slippery slide into communism. You cannot have socialism without democracy in its purest form. So when we talk about a democratic society, and we talk about the pure democracy that some people espouse, they're actually talking mobocracy, okay? We are not a democrat form of government. We are a republic. People need to be re-educated what a republic really is, and the difference between that and a democracy or a mobocracy. When they infiltrated the teachers' colleges, it only took 2 or 3 generations before we are where we are now. Most all these teachers have become what I call the progressive wokeism. And in order to get along, they have to play along. And they have become captured by what we call not the Democrat Party, but the actual Marxist Party, okay? Which is, they're using different names, feel-good names, for what it means the same thing. So our children are being indoctrinated in what I call the public schools or the federally funded schools. That's why more and more parents are pulling their kids out, and they're biting the bullet financially, and one of them is staying home, and the other one is going to work, and they're doing, with less, because they do not want their kids in a public school, and they cannot afford private schools. Private schools now average about $6,000 to $10,000 a year per student in a private school. Parents can't always afford that. So what I would do is, with this pandemic, as we call it, because it was deliberately created not by the Chinese, but by the United States in conjunction with the Chinese government, with the Communist Party of China. We had people like Dr. Charles Lieber, Harvard University. He had the 1,000 Talents program at Harvard. And 2 of the people that were in his 1,000 Talents program from China ended up staying with him and working in his lab. And when he was arrested a couple of years ago, we discovered she was still a lieutenant in the Red Chinese Army. We had Dr. Ralph Barack out of Chapel Hill, North Carolina. We had Dr. Danielle Anderson out of the University of Duke University. We had Obama and Fauci working together with these people in order to create these different viruses made with SARS, made with HIV, the coronavirus, which is your basic cold and flu, but you take that and you add tuberculosis or SARS or HIV to it and becomes deadly to the senior citizen population. What's happened in our schools right now is teachers are brainwashing our children. And to get our children back on track, number one, we do not need teachers like what's happened here in Douglas County to go to a little boy from kindergarten to 3rd grade and say, "Are you a little boy?" Now, this was reported to me by a mother. "Are you a little boy?" And he gets all upset and flustered. "Well, yes, I am." "Are you sure you're a little boy?" "Well, yeah, I think so." "Well, if you're a little boy, do you want to stay a little boy?" Now he's upset. He goes home to Mama. She's making dinner. He reported to me. He asked her, am I a little boy or a little girl? And she goes, well, why are you asking me this? Well, my teacher wanted to know if I was a boy or girl. I told her I was a boy, and then she asked, did I want to stay a boy? Now, this is a kid between kindergarten and third grade.
Wow.
The mother sat down with him, and as parents we know, only go so far with your child that he can handle. A 12th grader or even an 8th grader can handle more than a kindergarten to third grader. So she asked him, what was below his waist? I'm being very, very polite here on this radio podcast. So anyway, she asked what was below his waist, and he said, you do have one, don't you? And he said, well, yes, Mom, of course. And he gets all embarrassed, all upset, because he's beginning to be aware of his own body and that he's different from little girls. And she says, well, if you've got that below your waist, you're a boy. And she dropped the subject, went back to making dinner. She called the school the next day, and they said, as long as your kid is in a public school, which is federally funded, you don't have any say-so in what goes on in the classroom.
Wow.
We're finding children are reporting to us now that they're being asked to take surveys, and they're being told, do not tell your parents, grandparents, or guardians, whoever's raising you, foster mom or foster dad, what is in this survey. You're not allowed to take it home and fill it out. You have to do it here. And in some cases in Oregon and other states, they're being made to sign a contract swearing an oath that they will not discuss what goes on in the classroom. This is teaching children to lie. So what happened with the pandemic that we had is that they closed down our schools for up to 2 years. They kept us at home. Many parents just went along with the government because of the fear porn, the constant drumbeat of the media, which is controlled by night riders throughout the United States. If they want to keep their licenses to do business on TV, if they want to keep their licenses to be a newspaper or a radio station, they better do what they're told. We had so many children that were trying to school on computers where they were being set up in a virtual reality with the classroom with the teacher, and the children were reporting just horrible things that were happening to them. Parents are being seen stressing out while their kids were in school in the living room, and the domestic abuse went up, the substance abuse went up. Many of us gained a lot of weight because we had nothing to do really but sit around and watch TV and eat or maybe read books. So we weren't very active because people were even afraid to go outside and breathe the fresh air. People were taking walks in the park where there's only one of you in the park, but you're wearing a mask. You know, it became insanity. And this is what we call hysteria madness, of where everybody is brainwashed to think that you will be dangerous if you go into society and if you don't wear a mask. And yet wearing those diapers over your face is like putting a chain link fence around your face to try to keep out the mosquitoes. So to help our children, who are now 2 years plus behind, we need to get these teachers on track and say, you've got a job to do. You are getting paid for sitting home and not doing anything. And you never wanted to go back to work. Many of these teachers across the nation were fighting going back to work because they're getting all this free money because they're under contract and they barely even have to work at all. Some of them not at all, okay? And they wanted to collect unemployment indefinitely. So as governor, I would say if you go on strike and you're not willing to work with your employer to come to a compromise with you and the union, then you're not going to have your unemployment benefits extended indefinitely because now you have no incentive to try to work things out with your union or with your employer. So I would not, as governor, allow unemployment to be indefinitely extended. And for the teachers who don't want to go back to work, if you don't want to go back to work, we'll get rid of you. Even if you're under contract, you can be fired for negligence because of what you're doing to the children of our community. We'll find people that are fully qualified who really do want to work. What we need to do is have teachers willing to correct homework. Many of them won't send homework home with the kids because then they say, well, no one pays me after 3 o'clock in the afternoon to correct those papers until 7 or 8 or 9 o'clock at night. Well, excuse me, that should go with the job. And so these teachers are lazy. So we've had a lot of our children falling between the cracks even before the pandemic took place. Right now, Oregon is number 46 or 47 out of 50 nationwide as far as our education standards, and our graduation rate is dismal. Kate Brown, she said that too many children who are black, indigenous, and Latinos could not emotionally, mentally, physically, psychologically meet the standards for graduation. So she was going to get rid of the standardized testing, and she was going to get rid of many of the academic standards to graduate high school. Now, excuse me, you're dropping the bar for a few individual kids instead of helping them, not giving them handouts, but giving them help up, okay? So you're dropping the bar and the standards for a few, and you're harming all the other children in Oregon. And what you're doing is, when you say that children that are indigenous or black or Latino are not able to meet these standards, this is prejudice. This is a racist statement that our own governor, who supposedly is part of the Democrat Party, or the party that doesn't want divisiveness, to me that's divisive right there in itself, and it's racist. So as your governor, I would make sure that the standards are brought back up reasonably, a little bit at a time. I would make sure we give the extra attention to those kids. I would find teachers and substitute teachers that are willing to tutor, that are willing to work with these kids. Where there's a will, there's a way. And I also don't believe in Oregon we should any longer have the governor in charge of the educational system. This is just a conflict of interest to me. It's more power that should not be given to the governor. I think we should do what some states do. We should find either in our Constitution, or we should pass some kind of whatever it is that we need to do to make sure there's one person who's not the governor and not even a lieutenant governor, we don't have one in Oregon yet, who is in charge of all education, K through 12, throughout the entire state. And Mark Tillman, if he'd been governor, he would have been great with the knowledge of being a superintendent of schools, but I think he would have found someone, he would have appointed someone to be the Department of Education chair, working with him as the governor. So he would be able to have other responsibilities that we need as governor. Oregon's going through an arterial bleeding. We need to put a tourniquet on. We can't do lip service anymore. We can't do the Band-Aids any longer. Our children are now not graduating high school like they should. They don't have to go to college. They can go to trade school. They can get jobs. But they need to know their basic math, reading, writing, and civics to make it in the world, whether they go to college or trade school or not. And by us lowering the bar, you're hurting the whole state. And that's what the Marxist regime wants. That's what the New World Order wants. They want people dumbed down, a bunch of sheeple that can't think for themselves and can't think outside the box.
Yep. You said a lot there. There's a whole lot to absorb in all of that. And,
well, they can play it back if they want.
yeah. So I've only got a couple more questions for you. And this next one is, I'm just going to bunch it all up. The green movement, emissions, electric cars, and climate change. What are your thoughts and views on that?
Okay. I think people are making a lot more out of this climate change than it really is. We found out that Al Gore was making millions of dollars with all the hype. Many of the scientists now that I've talked to, I've studied, I've read up, I'm very well read, have been saying that much of this climate thing was way too much to do about nothing. Our Earth, our planet goes through cycles. We're not heading anytime soon that we know of into an ice age. We'd be more likely to be hit by an asteroid before that would happen right now. Our present planet as it is right now is having a lot of issues because we are allowing our rainforest to be cut down. That is where the problem is. It's not the cows out there in the farms of Kansas, Utah, Arizona, Oregon, that are emitting gas through their rear end, okay? Because if you know anything about the body anatomy of a cow, because of their internal system, they can't expel gases the way that AOC was saying. So number one, that's a joke. Talk to a farmer or rancher. Talk to my friend Tom Davis, who's in Harney County. He can educate you that AOC is basically, she's talking out of her ear. She doesn't know what she's talking about. And she's the same person that will turn around and say that we need to take all cars off the road and we need to stop emitting all these emissions. But she is driving around in fancy cars and she's flying around in Lear jets And, it's do as I say, but not as I do. We saw Nancy Pelosi do that. We saw in San Francisco, and we saw Tina Kotek and even Kate Brown basically going to their favorite hairdressers when they thought nobody could see. During the pandemic, they're closing down all the salons, all these people that this is their livelihood, and yet they were secretly going in to have their hair done. So Gavin Newsom did that. He said that all the restaurants had to close down, and yet he took 12 or 14 of his friends with no mask, and they went up to the French Laundry. One dinner will cost $300 per person, and he went up to the French Laundry up there, and they had them catered to. So, again, do as I say, not as I do. When it comes to the gas and what is happening with our natural resources, we're not running out of these natural resources. Biden is giving it away to other countries. Hillary Clinton came in here, and the reason why she wanted the Hammonds off of the ranches was not because of the fact that she was concerned about our resources. She wanted the uranium that surrounds the Hammond Ranch in Harney County. And the EPA said at that time they couldn't do any mining because it could damage the underground water, conifers, all right? So she was doing deals with Russia and Uranium One in Canada. And that was why they went after the Hammonds and tried to find ways to set them up, saying first that they had done an illegal backburn that got away, when it's the BLM that did it. In fact, the sheriff up in Grant County just arrested, John Day arrested a federal employee because he let a fire get away and it burned a lot of acreage. So if they can arrest the Hammonds for that, then so should the sheriff, God bless him, of Grant County, John Day, Oregon, be able to arrest a federal employee that was lazy and careless. Because if we're going to throw other people in jail for doing such and such, then we should throw the feds in jail for the same thing. So when it comes to gas vehicles versus electric, the electric vehicles are made with certain materials that could end up actually being more damaging over time to our environment. We're finding out that many solar panels, after they've outlived their usefulness, are actually harmful to the environment. And yet they're pushing solar technology all the time. When I heard the story of what would happen in California, California is now doing rolling brownouts and blackouts. They've been talking how the PG&E has to turn off people's electricity and how they'll be able to do it from their own base station. So here's the story I heard out of California. Pretend for a moment, Roy, that you have an electric car, and I assume you don't have one, right?
I actually do.
You do? Okay.
I do. I just got it, and it doesn't run. So I picked up somebody else's garbage.
You picked up a lemon, right?
Yeah, well, sort of. I got it really, really cheap. But yeah, let's not go there. Let's just pretend I don't have one.
Okay, well, I can tell you I don't, and I will do everything in my power to not have one if it means I have to walk, okay? So let's just tell you the story that was told to us over the radio about a man, let's say, in California, okay, south of our border here. And he has an electric car, and it's charging during the day while he's at work, and then he has to drive it home, and let's say he has to drive it 40 miles. Some people are commuting over an hour, so we're talking about 50 to 60 miles, okay, let's say. And he gets home in the evening, and he has a meeting he has to go to that evening. It could be he sits on the school board. It could be a parent-teacher conference. It could be that he is a volunteer at his church, but he's going to, as soon as he has dinner and he's taken a shower, he needs to go off to the meeting, and he probably won't get home till 9 o'clock at night, and he has to go to work the next morning. Well, he walks in the door after hooking his car up to the charging station at his home. He's told by his wife and children, oh, by the way, California's just said that we can't use any electricity for 4 hours, okay? So he has to disengage his electric car. So he thinks he's going to go and take a shower. Well, sorry, Dad, there's no hot water. You know that we've all been basically forced to not have gas heaters heating up our water in the water tank anymore, but it's electric. So you can't take a shower because we can't use electricity. And you can't come in, and we can't make dinner on our electric stoves. Most of us have electric ovens and range tops now, not gas, few and far between. So you can't make dinner because you're using electricity, and you can't use the microwave because you're using electricity. And they're even trying to propose putting certain instruments outside your house to be able to alert them, sort of like the electricity police, if you violated that 4-hour window of not using any electricity. So here's a man that can't take a shower, can't eat his dinner, and can't drive his car because he's not allowed to charge it, so he can't go to his meeting.
That's pretty restrictive.
It's ridiculous. And I think it's just another scam for more people to get wealthy and who are going to buy into the stocks and, and the a prediction that if we, purchase this much stock, we're going to make this much money, because we're going to force everybody to have electric cars who doesn't want electric cars. Electric cars don't go very far without having to be charged. And the other day, my husband and I were someplace, and we saw 3 cars sitting in a parking lot in Medford, Oregon, and they were having to charge their vehicles. And the husband and wife are sitting there, or the couples are sitting, 3 separate cars, and they're looking at their phones, and they're sitting there. And we went into Red Lobster in Medford to get some dinner. We have never been to a Red Lobster, and we decided to treat ourselves. We've been on the campaign trail for weeks and weeks all over Oregon, going places the other 3 people running against me are not willing to go, because they don't think Medford and Eastern Oregon is worth their time and trouble, even though those would be their constituents too. So we went into Red Lobster, and I have to say we were in there about 2 hours. We came back out. Can you venture to guess what we found?
Those 3 cars were possibly still sitting there?
Yes.
Wow.
So no, this is not cool.
You'd have to have a lot of extra idle time to charge your car. It sounds like.
So let's say you want to go from, let's say, Ashland, and you want to go visit your family member up in Portland. Is your car going to be able to take you? Because from Ashland to, let's say, Roseburg is a little over 2.5 hours. And from Roseburg up to Salem is another 2 hours. That's 4 hours, and Portland's another hour beyond. So that's 5 hours. Is your electric car going to be able to go for 5 hours? I don't think so.
Some of the newer cars, I heard, get close to 300 miles to the gallon, over 200 anyway. The older ones, they have something called battery deprivation. They started off with 60, 70 miles per charge, and now, 10 years later, they're getting, less than 30. So,
yeah. Wow.
The technology still has a ways to go, and I don't believe that our infrastructure is ready to handle the demand on the power grid for sure. And
I agree. No, I think the thing is it's interesting. It's the same old saying that we had people like Dianne Feinstein down in California, south of the border here, and she was trying to take away people's Second Amendment rights. The Second Amendment guarantees our First Amendment. We lose our Second Amendment, and our First Amendment is completely out the window. We've already found that our First Amendment has been under assault by the Facebook, which is created by the Chinese and by the CIA as a way of tracking people. So people who do not believe that Facebook was invented by the CIA and that Mark Zuckerberg has been given awards and decorations by the FBI and the CIA in the actual ceremonies because of his part in what they've been doing, that we lose every day. Where there's more censoring, there's more of the thought police. They've made movies about that. I think Tom Cruise was in a movie that basically talks about you being arrested for something they think you might do and within 12 to 24 hours into the future. Many of these futuristic movies are actually terrifyingly coming true. So when we turn around and we look at what is happening in our society, and people keep saying, well, our government wouldn't do this to us. You take away your Second Amendment, your First Amendment goes right out the window, okay? There's no longer freedom of the press. There's no longer freedom of speech. There's no longer freedom of your religion or to choose no religion, to choose no spiritual, daily or weekly training or whatever of practicing with other people of like mind. You lose your Second Amendment, which is your God-given, your natural right, whether you believe in God or not, or believe in a creator or a great architect in the sky. Whatever people's personal feelings are, just like your sexual orientation should stay in your bedroom, You should not be parading around in the street half naked because you have a certain sexual orientation. Many people really are offended by that, and people even of those particular gender decisions that they feel they were born this way, or for whatever reason society, things have happened, that these are either sometimes choices and sometimes they're not. It's a biological thing from what I've been told in my training as a nurse. So the judgmental that comes with it, when you turn around and you say, you don't have a right to protect yourself, and we're going to take all these rights away from you to protect the rest of society, no, what you're doing, you're actually causing us to become more in danger of harm from the criminals who are not going to follow those laws and those rules. So I really think that people need to stop and think instead of having knee-jerk reactions. And many of our policies are draconian. Many of our policies are absolutely insane. And the violations against our state constitutions and our national constitution, where our own Supreme Court of the United States was too cowardly to take a stand for what they knew was true and right. Their job is not to make laws. Their job is to interpret the laws. And our Congress, over time, have proven to us that they will not do their job. The people in the Senate and the people in Congress who are there 20, 30, 40 years, they have no interest in protecting the people in America anymore. Their only interest is to keep getting themselves reelected. And I see that's what happened with these three women in the legislature. However this election goes on the 8th, I know darn well that money is buying the election, and I don't have the millions given to me that they do. So I know I'm not going to be the governor, but I'm going to continue to use my voice to make common sense and say to the people, vote for me. Vote for me. It's not splitting the vote. It's sending a message not only to Salem but around the country that you want somebody who truly walks the walk and talks the talk and will not bend like a willow tree and will stand like an oak when we need someone to stand with a backbone. I don't know how you feel, Roy, when it comes to what is happening here in Oregon. You're a father yourself. You're married to a lady that is very devoted to family. She comes from a background where they're very devoted to their families. I had people in my family from the Philippines, from Korea, and from Mexico. My maid of honor was Black American. She was a sergeant major in my Army Reserve unit. Two of the women that were my maids of honors were Black Americans. We didn't see each other's skin color, okay? I have people in my family, nephews and nieces and cousins, that are homosexual or lesbians. That is not a life choice for myself. That is not a lifestyle I would choose for myself or even for them. But it's their life, their choice. And if people are going to turn around and say, my body, my choice, then we should not be forced or coerced or blackmailed or threatened to lose our lives or livelihoods or lose going to college if we don't take the jab. If you're going to tell me it's my life, my choice, then those invasive procedures, especially shots being given, I don't call them vaccinations, they're not. They're inoculations. They haven't gone through the 5 to 7 minimal testing period or even 10 to 15-year testing period that all vaccinations and all medications have to go through before they can be released to the doctors and the clinics. You need to have 5 to 7 years minimal of testing with animal trials where the majority of the animals survive with little to no side effects. And then if you're going to put them through human trials, those humans, if they're going to get paid to be experimented on like guinea pigs, they need to be given informed consent and not have it covered up when you have an animal or a human being die due to the shots that you've given them. So people need to wake up. And I am that governor candidate, that gubernatorial candidate that's saying, you know what, I'm not going to sit here and turn a deaf ear and a blind eye any longer. I'm not going to play along to get along. I'm going to take a stand and come hell or high water. I don't care what you throw at me, but I'm going to stand for Oregonians and for Oregon, and that includes southern, rural, and eastern Oregon.
Nice. Well, you definitely sound like you're not one that's going to bend or change your values just to please other people. So
no, I'm not here to appease people. You may not like what I have to say, but the truth hurts. And the truth is that we have allowed this to happen in our society, our country, and our state. And it's now time to shit or get off the pot. It's time to roll up your sleeves and say, you know what? This is a beautiful country. It was created by wonderful people who were true blue, the salt of the earth, and we're attacking our truck drivers. We're attacking our farmers and our ranchers. We're going after the small business because they're the creatives, the entrepreneurs. They're the ones that are invade us. They're the ones that are saying, look, I can roll up my sleeves and make something out of nothing. That's not what the New World Order wants. That's not what the fascist regime wants. George Soros and Bill Gates, again, whose father helped found Planned Parenthood, these people are eugenics. And they believe that most of us people are useless eaters and feeders. They even told Jesse Ventura, when he was no longer governor, one of the ladies said that one of her customers came in and said, it's time for us to start calling the herd. Well, you and I are the useless eaters and feeders, according to the 1%. The people like the Bilderbergs, the people, the monarchies, the people, the wealthy people that have been born generation after generation with the spoons in their mouth. They believe that the middle-class people should not exist, and it should be the haves and the have-nots. Only two, the rich and the poor. And they're trying to get rid of the middle class. And yet we're the biggest tax-paying base in the United States of America. Even though all of our taxes are going to the monarchy in England and the IRS is domiciled in Puerto Rico, people just don't know. They need to read the book, The Creature from Jekyll Island. They need to read the book again that they read when they were in high school called Animal Farm. It's a satire of what the animals do when they uprose against Farmer Jones and his family and kicked them off the farm, and the animals ran the farm themselves. The ones who were in charge of the other animals were the pigs. And one of them, he was named Napoleon. And he put up on the wall, I think it was at the barn or something, he said, all animals are equal, but some are more equal than others. That is what communism does. Socialism leads to communism. You don't want pure democracy because pure democracy never works. That's why many countries have only lasted 200 years and are not around any longer. We need to get back our republic. We need to be reminded that we, the people, are the people that are in charge of the government. We are the people. They are the servants. We are the ones that can decide our own destiny and self-determination.
From the bottom up.
From the bottom up. That's why you people don't worry about what's going on in Washington, D.C. and the cesspools there. As I've been told by the experts, start with your grassroots and your local communities. Take back your school boards. Take back your county commissioner seats if they're not doing their job. Make sure you have a constitutional sheriff. If he's not, fire him or get him recalled. Make sure that you go to these parent-teacher conferences. Stop being so lazy and staying at home in front of the boob tube or playing video games or playing on your phone. Put down your phone and talk to your spouse or your significant other. Talk to your children. Start having at least one meal a day around the table where you talk to your children and ask them how their day went. Let's start getting back our society. You don't have to go to church. The organized religions, many of them are captured. They are beholden to the IRS under 501(c) status. The ministers and the pastors are not really taking care of their sheep. So what you need to do is start thinking for yourself. That's what they don't want you to do. If we all stand up and take back our communities, one city at a time, one town at a time, I don't care if you have 808 people like the town of Wallowa, or if you have 54 people like the town of Jontura in Oregon, in eastern Oregon, or you have 4 people like in the town of Riley, Oregon, okay? Or you have a couple thousand. It all starts with one person, and it can snowball from there. And I believe, as your governor, whether, somewhere down the line, wherever God decides to place me, that's where I will go. Okay, I will let go and let God. But I need to do this, to say we need a wake-up call. People like Roy, who's still raising children at home, who's still trying to put food on the table. He understands that the gas prices have been artificially pushed way up. Biden is bringing it down a little until the election on the 8th of November. and then it's going to go right back up again. I also want to say something, Roy, if I may, at the tail end of this.
Sure, absolutely.
I'm asking people, please, who are watching this, call your family and friends across the nation. First of all, you need to watch the movie 2,000 Mules by Donice Noelle. Of course, the New World Order and the wokeism and the Democrats are going to tell you it's a bunch of malarkey. It is not. We've seen it happening right here in Oregon. We saw it happen in May. It's probably going to happen next week on Tuesday, the 8th of November. People have already been selected. They will not be elected. If by some miracle an individual does get into the governor's office, and it's not me, I predict that within 4 years that individual will be going more and more to the left to confer, to bend to the will of the Democrat Party. And we're not going to be that much better off, a little bit better off than we would be if we had one of the very, very liberal Dems who would be in charge of Oregon. But yeah. I'm not going anywhere. And so I'm asking people, please, they have used the mail-in voting for those people that forget, that are lazy. What you need to do is you need to go down on the 8th, if not the 7th, and hand deliver your ballot. Go down on the 8th, get a few minutes from your lunch break, go down to your elections clerk or wherever town that you're working in, and fill out the ballot and turn it in, hand deliver it right there. Fill out those bubbles with blue ink, less likely for them to tamper with it. Make sure you sign the outside of the envelope. Make sure you hand deliver it on the 8th. We're telling everybody, one of the ways to stop the stealing of this other elections is do not vote before the 8th. Do not mail in your ballot. Let me repeat, do not mail in your ballot. 3 times is a charm. Do not mail in your ballot. We are finding out now that they have found a system, at least here in Oregon, where these secrecy envelopes are color-coded. Coos County put out a video that's excellent, that you all need to go on BitChute or Rumble and look up the interesting story of Coos County. They have a documentary there that the people, Citizens for Restoring Liberty, have created this wonderful film documentary. And I was at their county fair a few months ago, and I videotaped it on my phone. They had a booth there, and in this booth it showed exactly what our elections clerks, most of them Democrats, are controlled by the Democrats in order to keep their jobs, are color-coding these envelopes. And when they get the envelopes to the post office, which is pretty much very liberal, when they get these envelopes, they can tell with their name on the outside and your return address if you're a Democrat or a liberal or a Republican or conservative or independent. They actually have numbers, 3 or 4 sets of numbers that tell them who you are. And then who knows what happens to your ballot once it's been mailed in. Wow. Okay? Wow. So we're asking you to hand deliver it, preferably on Tuesday, the 8th of November, or take it down and put it in a drop box on the 7th. Do not do it before the 7th. This is going to make it more difficult for their algorithms and their other methods of being able to try to change and flip our votes. The other thing, we need to get back to in-person voting, one person, one ballot, one ID that matches with you, that shows that you are an American citizen or that you are a naturalized citizen. What's happening here, Roy, and I don't know if you're aware of this, do you have any family members that go to college right now?
Not at the moment.
Okay. So what's happening is you have college students coming to Oregon. Some of them are from out of state, so they're paying a little bit higher tuition. Students coming from other countries like Japan, Korea, Germany, they're paying double and triple the tuition that our locals are having to pay for the same junior colleges or the university. And of course, the universities are a higher cost for tuition. So the student comes here, and they're going to be here 4 years. Well, they need to get around, right? And our infrastructure, which I would make some changes on that, I believe a bullet train to go up and down the I-5 corridor, similar to the BART, the BART rapid transit system they have throughout the Alameda, Contra Costa County, and San Francisco Bay Area. They call it the rapid BART system, train system. So let's say that, there's not a lot of buses around, and taxis and Uber drivers are a little bit cheaper, but taxis are expensive. So need to drive. So they're going to go get their Oregon driver's license. Well, the Democrats were very crafty. They put together what we call the motor voter law, and they did the same thing in California. And this means that when you go in and you get your driver's license, they ask you, are you registered to vote? And you say, well, no, I'm not. And they say, well, would you like to register? Now, some of these students know that they're registered in their home state, and their parents will be receiving their ballots, or family members in their home states will be receiving ballots for them. And not everybody's ethical, so sometimes their family members will fill it in for them. Well, the student just got a driver's license, and so now the Democrats control Department of Motor Vehicles in California and Oregon. They're going to go ahead and either fill in those boxes for them, and or if you fill it in, like it happened to two of my sons on 2 different occasions, they went in to get new driver's licenses or register their new cars, and they were asked were they registered to vote, and they said yes. Well, the Democrat-controlled DMV decided to fill in the box of Democrats. Or what they did is very crafty now what they're doing is, and of course a lot of elections clerks are denying this, and of course Kate Brown and her people up in Salem are denying this, but let's say you're registered Republican or Democrat, mostly this is happening to Republicans and independents. Well, what they're doing is if you're registered as Republican, they're going to remark you that you're an independent or non-affiliated. And then you wonder when the primary comes up why you didn't get the proper ballot. You got a ballot that only gave you the choice to vote for judges in your local community. Or you only got a ballot that had you vote for judges you don't even know who they are, or vote for certain measures in your community, and you're wondering, why am I not getting to vote for the Republican or Democrat in my primary? It's because someone changed your affiliation to being independent or a NAV, non-affiliated, or some other party like the Constitution Party. So if you go down to your elections clerk and say, I want a different envelope, this is wrong. Oh, we can't do that. It's too late. The window's closed. A lot of people don't realize that even when they're getting on the computer, the day before or the night of, the last time you can file or change your party, that even when you're changing your party or you're checking your affiliation and it says Republican, all of a sudden someone, somewhere, is switching it on you before midnight, and then you are not going to get the ballot you should get in the primary. This is more fraud. This is more election fraud to make sure you can't vote in your primary and decide who goes on to the general election. So these college students, some of them are unethically going ahead and voting when they know they're not even from this country. They're not naturalized or American-born citizens. So they're voting because they've been taught to think, the mind think of the Marxist or the New World Order, you know, the group think.
And they received a ballot in the mail, right?
Yes, and they usually receive, and some of them receive 2 and 3 and admitted to me that they received 2 or 3 ballots in the mail. One of these was a gentleman. He was born overseas in Africa. His parents were killed in a car accident. He was brought to the United States to Washington State, and he was adopted by his mother, his foster mother, but she never bothered to actually get him naturalized before he hit the age of 18. So therefore, he came out of Washington State down to Salem, and he was going to the university, and he received, when he went to get his driver's license for 4 years, because he's a college student, he received a ballot in the mail, and he admitted that he was doing the wrong thing, but his other students from other countries were doing the same thing. And so even though he had been living in the United States and graduated high school in Washington State and was now going to college as a non-American and non-naturalized citizen, he was going to go ahead and vote the Democrat way, the way his Democrat and Marxist teachers at the universities, which are now captured, okay, the way they told him to vote. And some people don't have a conscience. Yet there's other students that have said, look, when I got the ballot, I turned it back in and said, I'm not legal to vote here. So you're going to get both kinds, but unfortunately you're going to get more of the other. So now your college student goes back. I'm not done, Roy. Your college student goes back to Germany or Korea or Kansas or Texas, and they've graduated with their 4-year degree, and they've been gone 2, 3, 4 years. Well, guess what? They're still voting. I wonder how that's happening. Just like people that are dead are still voting. We're finding out that there's people in the Democrat Party, the far left Liberal Party, and even in the Peace Party, the Green Party, and the Progressive Party. Those three are really the same. But they're actually going through the obituaries, and they're walking through cemeteries. And it's interesting, we found in 2020 that people were 130 and 140 years old that were voting in the 2020 election, the general election for the presidency. How can a person 130 and 140 years of age be still voting? How can people in convalescent hospitals that have Alzheimer's, that don't even recognize their children or their grandchildren, even know their own name, how can they be voting? This system is fraught with corruption, and it's going to take a major overhaul. But one city, one county, and one state at a time.
Lord willing, we'll get it. We're gonna get it, and we're gonna get it turned around and get things back on the right track and make this.
I want people to go to my website. I'm a retired master sergeant, 35 years in the military. My husband is retired enlisted and an officer. He retired. We're getting a part-time pension, each of us, from our military days, and we're getting our Social Security because we're over the age of 65. We decided to collect it earlier because we had some situations happening when we were in the military that we needed to have taken care of, and they did. And they said we had to pay for Medicare. It was not a choice we wanted, but if we wanted to have our retired military called TRICARE for Life or TRICARE or TRI-West, in order to get what we were promised when we went in the military 40 years ago, 45, 47 years ago, we were told we would have free medical for the rest of our life, which is maybe not even as good as Congress and the senators have, who haven't paid into Social Security at all. So we were told that if we wanted to have our military pension, medical retirement as we were promised, now we couldn't have it unless we paid for Medicare. So what I'm trying to tell people right now is I want them to go to my website. As governor, I would not take a paycheck. My husband and I will not take medical for ourselves or our family. We have 3 different medical sources, types of insurance, and so we're covered. I don't need the money. I want it to go back to Oregonians. I want it to stop this arterial bleeding. I want it to go to groups and nonprofits that are really deserving, who have suffered terribly in many ways through the pandemic.
Would you take your paycheck and redistribute it personally to the people that you think you want to support and give it to, or would you just say no, don't give me?
I would actually take ideas from people in my administrative, from both sides of the aisle, both Democrats and Republicans, and the Constitution Party, and other people, and say, okay, where is the need the greatest? Every 3 months. 158,000 plus goes a long way, and that over 4 years, we're talking about, 600,000 or more? Mm-hmm. Okay? So, yes, I would do that, and I would make sure that we track where the money's going. There would be accountability on paper, and it would be tracked and followed, not people running around with fancy gold jewelry and driving fancy cars, or CEOs flying around in Learjets, in and out of Portland or in and out of Salem. That money is going to go to the people. None of this going into a general fund like Kate Brown's been doing for years. None of this working with the Red Chinese Party to play along, to get along. And she right now has purchased a building in Harney County in the town called Burns. She said it's for the homeless. Oh, really? Okay. And then she's also taking people from Afghanistan and illegals, and she's taking them up and she's dropping them in Enterprise, Oregon, where she thinks the rest of us won't know what she's doing. And we also know a lot of illegals are supposedly going to be taken to Burns and dropped in that small community. And I call this feeding. God bless DeSantis and others that said these illegals need to be taken by bus or airplane and dropped in New York City in Manhattan. They need to be taken out to Martha's Vineyard, where the rich people are out there. And they say, oh, we believe in diversity, we believe in opening our hearts and our homes to people, but don't you bring these illegals here. So, again, do as I say, but not as I do. That's why our society is the way it is. It has gone into a decline for the last 120 years. It's definitely gone into a decline since 1871, when the corporations, with the help of the Vatican and England, the Queen at the time, 1871, they couldn't take us over during the Revolutionary War. They came back in 1812 and tried to take us over and burn down our White House and many of our church records. When they couldn't take us over in 1812, then the Queen of England and the Vatican helped finance the Confederate Army to fight in the Civil War. When they weren't successful with that, they came back and started the corporations in 1871. And basically our Constitution has been grounded in the dirt, has become almost null and void since 1871, and the corporations have made us into tax-paying slaves. But that's for another day.
Okay. Wow, we've covered a lot of ground here, Donice. And did I say your name right?
It is pronounced Donice with a silent I. It's Donice Noelle Smith. Jansen is my maiden name. I was an actress, a little bit of an actress. My mother was more of one. She was in Hollywood. My uncle, Hugh O'Brien, who played Wyatt Earp on TV in the 50s and 60s, he was a Republican. He was the youngest drill instructor in the Marine Corps history. He founded Hobie Hugh O'Brien Youth Leadership Foundation all around the world and other countries as well for sophomores that trying to groom them for leadership and be responsible citizens. My mother played in the movie Rebel Without a Cause with James Dean. She was the stand-in for Natalie Wood. And then about that time, my uncle played Wyatt Earp. He had his own TV series, the Wyatt Earp series, from the 50s to the 60s. He played the part of Arnold Schwarzenegger's dad in the movie Twins with Danny DeVito.
Okay.
He's the father that Arnold seeks out. So, you know, I have a family background of farmers and ranchers and actors and actresses and authors and writers and firefighters and law enforcement.
Wow.
My son just started out as a millwright. My brother is a truck driver. You know, I'm a nurse. My husband's a nurse. I
Americans, right? We're Americans, and we've got this great American history that falls, you know, behind us and brought us to where we are today, and we can't let it end like that. You know, we can't just lay down and give up and let all of it just come to nothing.
Boy, we can't. You know, my family background, I trace my genealogy, and my great-great-great-great-great-grandfather, and it's many great facts, was born in 1000 in England. And when he was 20 years old, he went to Normandy. And he ended up having 2 sons. So he was born in 1000 in England, before it was England like it is now. And he went to Normandy, France, when he was about 20. He ended up getting married and having 2 sons. And in 1066, when both these sons were in their 40s, they went with William the Conqueror, and they went back to England, and they fought in the Battle of Hastings. The Battle of Hastings was the last battle. It was the end of the Viking Age. And then I had great-grandfathers that were sheriffs in Nottingham. I come from Princess Margaret, House of Stuart. Douglas is my great-grandmother. King Henry VIII is my great-granduncle. I have 2 grandfathers that both fought in the World War I. One was in the Army. The other one, he joined the Marine Corps. Both my grandfathers were in the Marine Corps. One flew with Pappy Boyington and the Flying Tigers. He was in Burma, in Shanghai, and he was known as Dutch in the Burma mission. He was the one that worked on Corsairs. He was their mechanic. My mother's great-great-grand cousin, who's mine, is Ronald Amundsen, who was the Norwegian out of Norway. He was a Norwegian explorer that founded the South Pole. I come from a family of firsts and movers and shakers, and we're not afraid to take a stand for what we believe in. So I'd like people to go to my website. It's Donice, D-O-N-I-C-E, like Donice for Oregon. Donice, D-O-N-I-C-E, Smith, S-M-I-T-H, for F-O-R, Oregon.com. That's Donice, D-O-N-I-C-E, Smith, for F-O-R, Oregon.com. And you can also find a place there where you can send me an email. You can call me on my phone. I'll return the calls. I want you all to be able to look yourself in the mirror and say that you are willing to take a stand, not live by fear porn. Know that whatever happens in November is going to be a wake-up call and a learning lesson for all of us. And then we'll just have to see what happens in the next 4 years. But I'm not going anywhere. I don't know where I'm going to be. I have people in the Republican Party asking me to come back to the Republican Party. But I'm not going to go back to the Republican Party and just be somebody who's seen and not heard, and where my talents and my skills and my abilities are either ignored or misused or abused. I believe I have a lot left to give, and I believe that the military and my medical training and my instructing as a teacher, that I have a lot to give to Oregonians. And so I'm not going to just put up and shut up. I'm not just going to be a little hossafrog sitting there watching soap operas and eating bonbons. That's not who I am. So whether I stay with the Constitution Party, whether or not something's done with the Republican Party, there's even some talk of trying to create a party called the New Republican Party or the New Republican Constitution Party. These are all things we're throwing around right now, but that would take a lot of work, creating new bylaws, getting people together behind this. And right now, people are still lazy. They're still apathetic. They're still hoping somebody else will do it. Well, someone else is not going to do it. Every organization, every church, every school, every club, you seem to have 1% of the people do all the work, and everybody else will eat at the potluck, grab the dishes, and run out the door, not even clean up after themselves. So until we get back into the frame of us working together, teamwork, the governor can't do it by his or herself.
And when we work together, we can achieve so much, right?
There you go.
We can get so much done when we work together.
We don't need to be a bunch of sheeple. We don't need to be a bunch of lemmings. We need to really, really pray, for those of you that believe in praying.
Absolutely.
And we need to work together. And Roy, I bet you and your parents, when you were growing up, I bet they were more actively involved in your education. And you and your wife, I suspect you're very actively involved in your kids' education.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I was blessed. I had great parents, and I'm still blessed. I've got a wonderful wife and smart kids and all kinds of great things going on. And this is just another one, right? This is just another great thing, being able to help, to give, like you mentioned, you have a lot to give, and keep giving. You may not win this election and become the governor of Oregon, but your voice still gets to be heard, and that's great because we need to hear it.
Well, I'm going to tell you right now, I met people in Enterprise and Joseph and a place called Imniwa. I pronounce it I don't want to butcher it. IMNAHA. It is basically indigenous reservation. It's up in the very, very right-hand corner, almost in Washington State and Idaho. I went to the Paiute Reservation 3 times in the last couple months and met people there. Talked to people in some of the indigenous reservations outside Sisters, talking about their medical care, what's going on with them. The racism is still being visited upon some of these indigenous reservations in Eastern Oregon, and there were 3 of them I visited. I talked to ranchers and farmers who feel that Salem doesn't care about them, that they only care about Portland and Salem, Eugene, and maybe Medford, okay? So this is wrong. This is wrong. And these people are saying, why didn't we hear about you? Why was the Oregonian and the Willamette Weekly, which is very liberal, keeping you out of the news media? Why was Fox News reporting that history-making of 3 women running for Oregon governor when there's 4 of us women that are running for Oregon governor? Natalia dropped out. She's with the Peace Green Progressive Party. She's with all 3. And Leon dropped out. So he's not in the voter's guide, but he didn't drop out in enough time to get off the ballot. So he was a libertarian. Then you have a person who wants people to vote for him as a write-in, and he's not as qualified as both myself and even the other lady that is the lesser of the 3 evils. Okay, let's put it that way. Sweet lady, nice lady, but she doesn't have any leadership background. She has a wishbone for a backbone. She always confers to the other side to play along, to get along. And you need a governor that's got a backbone. You need someone that's going to say no. You need someone that's going to make decisions based on well-informed information. You cannot, as a father, a mother, a grandparent, as a teenager, you cannot make good decisions if you don't have all the information at the table. And her bending to the will and pressure of others can be destructive in itself. So I'm really hoping that people will understand that I love Oregon. I chose this to be my home state.
Amen.
When I retired from the military, I have family and relatives buried here. My great-grandmother is buried right outside Central Point. My great-granduncle is buried right next to her in the little town of Jackson. I have a granddad that's buried up in Klamath Falls. Some of my ancestors came over the Oregon Trail, and they are buried up in northern Oregon. I have 3 of my kids here. My grandkids have been born here. This is my home, and I'm not going anywhere. If my grandkids leave here and my 3 sons leave here, well, then we'll see. But I'm not one of those, and I think you've heard this by now. I don't believe in jumping ship before it hits the shore, and I don't believe that you bail out of the ship because it's taken in a little bit of water. You grab whatever method, whether it's a can, whether it's your cup, whether it's your hat, your baseball cap, and you just start spooning the water out, okay? You work together. It's what we called in nursing, team nursing. In the military, we had each other's back to back, side to side. You take that hill. If you can't go in the front door, you go in the back door. If you can't go in the back door, you go in a window. If you don't have a window and you can't go up on top, you dig underneath. But one way or another, you take and you complete that mission. And we've got a long ways to go here in Oregon, but I believe in the Oregonians. I believe in the true grit. I believe in the Christian religious communities here in Oregon, that they know the basic rule of doing to others, and that they believe that we should get back to being a righteous nation again, the way our founding fathers intended it. That Constitution, I believe, was spiritually dictated to, and I believe our founding fathers gave up literally their lives, their livelihoods. Many lost their lives because they signed that Declaration of Independence. We need to not forget the men and women that died overseas, even dying in wars that were not declared wars, that were police actions, in countries we had no business going to. As your governor, I would not allow the National Guard to go overseas for illegal conflicts and illegal wars. We need to keep our National Guard, our Air National Guard, our Army National Guard here in Oregon for natural disasters, whether it's a Cascadia event, whether it's wildfires, whether it's a pandemic, or lend them to other states that are short on National Guard or Air National Guard soldiers. But no longer should we be sending our men and women overseas for wars to be killed or maimed, for wars that are the wars of the rich and the elitists as part of their depopulation agenda. They want to depopulate the world's population by 90% in the next 8 years. The only time I didn't see any war upon war upon war was during the 4 years of Trump. Now, Trump did a lot of wonderful things, and he made a few mistakes, and there was times he should have kept his mouth shut. But for the most part, I've seen more people happy and do so well financially, including their investments in their stock and their 401ks under Trump, than I've ever seen on any president in my 67 years of life. So the American people need to get out from behind their computers, their laptops, their cell phones, their TV boob tubes, and they need to be willing to be active participants in their community. Roy, I hope you're going to impress that upon people in your community. And I'm asking people, please vote for me. Vote your conscience. Don't let people coerce you to throw away vote or say that if Tina gets in, it's the fault of Leon or it's the fault of the other 3 people that are running against these 3 women. If Tina gets in, it's probably because the election has been stolen again, okay? And I think Betsy Johnson, who was a Democrat running unaffiliated, that was a way to just split the vote, and I think that's wrong. So, again, I want people to vote their conscience. Understand that, don't say that you don't want to vote anymore because your vote never goes anywhere, or you vote for something and it passes and then it's held up in court for years. You are duty-bound. You are morally and ethically and spiritually obligated to take that right that you were born with or naturalized citizen and go out there and vote. You don't have to vote everything on your ballot. If you don't want to vote for me or vote for one of the others, then put in Mickey Mouse. But for God's sake, I'm begging you to get out and vote. Please vote.
Amen.
You don't have to throw it all in. You don't have to say that, oh, I got to vote the party line, all D's or all R's. No, you can vote R's and C's and I's, and even if you think the person's not going to get in, it is sending a message. It is not a throwaway vote. And eventually, people will be waking up more en masse. And people will begin to realize that only we together, we the people, can take back our cities, our towns, and our states. And I pray all of you really have a very good rest of the week.
And our America.
And I'll go on my prayers. Thank you, Roy.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Donice. And, like you said, you have a lot to give. And I would like to encourage you to keep dishing it out and never surrender. Just keep dishing it out.
I don't even know the meaning of the word quit. People have accused me of being the ever-ready rabbit. And my friend Tom Davis, he's a cowboy out in Harney County, and he said that, here he is pushing 70, and this man gets up, and we were on his property for 2 nights in our camper. He gets up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and he's got the motor going at 5, and he is going up into the mountains, rounding up them doggies, the cattle, checking to find out which ones are injured or have had their babies or whatever, and bringing them closer down off the mountain. And he said that he never wants to stop. The minute you stop, you die. And I believe that's the same way Robert LaVoy Finnegam believed. And by the way, I want to let you know that Jeanette Finnegam, she's going to be in court in Portland. I think it's going to be the 7th of November for the hearing, for the trial. So it is going forward, and we would like to have as many people as possible show up on the 7th of November in Portland for that event. I think it's very important that people do show up and support her. Realize that we still have patriots in prison right now. We call them political prisoners. Also understand that what happened on January the 6th was basically controlled and maneuvered by the FBI, the corrupt FBI, and the CIA, and that many of the White Hats are aware of that. People took advantage of it. It was Black Lives Matter and Antifa that we had seen in November. My husband and my son and I were there in November for Stop the Steal. That's another story for another day. But in November we were there, and many of the same Antifa and Black Lives Matter were paid by George Soros and paid by as crisis actors to carry the Trump hats and shirts in their backpacks. And when Trump was still talking, they were to march to the Capitol, and there were police there. I saw the video of Capitol Police, one was a black woman, pull back the banisters and wave them through, and they waved through the CNN. So you see the CNN going through the rotunda. They weren't arrested. They weren't put in jail. Isn't that interesting? I think that the CNN was breaking the law if they came on the premises and we're being told other people were breaking the law for even being outside the Capitol and doing nothing, and they're still sitting in jail. And they're being accused of things where they're not being given their day in court, and they're not being allowed to have their phone calls and have even lawyers. So what happened on January the 6th was a travesty, and I think history will prove out in time that this was controlled by the very far liberal Democrats, the CIA, and the FBI. So I want people to know we still have political prisoners who are being tortured in Washington, D.C. jails. You need to be aware of that. You need to go and watch the film called Bloody Hill. It's put out by 107. You can find it maybe through 107daily.com. That's his answer to the Facebook that's censoring us. It's 107, the number 107, and the word daily.com. It's free to go in and register. If you want the extras, you might have to pay a little bit extra a month for it, like $2 or $2.99. But if you want to really know what's going on, that's a safe place to go and express yourself and not worry about being censored. So I really strongly encourage people to do that. I really thank you, Roy, for reaching out to me again. However your vote, I'm not telling people how to vote. I would like them to vote for me, but I'm not going to ask them to vote under pressure, because I'm asking other people to stop pressuring me to drop out. They want me to drop out and put my support behind somebody that I felt sold out Oregonians while she was in the legislature. I'm not going to sell out due to fear porn. Whatever happens is going to happen. I'm not going to be responsible for what happens after November 8th. It has been a pattern and a process of getting to where we are. So don't turn around, as one man said to me tonight, well, if you don't do this and that, he said that you're going to be responsible for another 30 years of Democrat communist rule. No, don't lay that guilt bullet on me. You're much older than I am, and I mean much older. Many of you people out there, and you guys allowed this to happen before I relocated back to Oregon. So don't lay that on me. So thank you, Roy.
Thank you, and I'm really glad we were able to connect and get this recording done, and I'll be sure to share it and get it out there. So hopefully, people like myself will, they'll look at their ballot, they'll see your name on there, and go, "Who is this woman?" and do a little quick search and get the information they need to make the right choices.
Well, I can let you know is that I am going to be brought up on tomorrow. I'm going to the studio of a local radio station here, and he's going to interview me. Another one contacted me from Portland. He's angry that I'm not being mentioned in any of the media. I'm not being allowed to debate these women because I was told by a lady in the Oregonian verbally, and then another one was nasty in email. You don't have any credibility if you don't have millions of dollars behind your name. And see, what happens is when you bring in $2 million, let's say, and you don't win the election, then that $2 million can basically, you can donate it to another candidate for another election. You can donate it to your party for them to use how they will. So it behooves these Republicans and Democrat parties to really help make sure that millions of dollars are brought into these candidates running in the general election. So even if I was offered money by Phil Knight, who's a liberal, who doesn't like what Tina stands for, doesn't like what Betsy Johnson stands for, and doesn't really care that much for Christine, that he gave millions to Tina, he gave then millions to Betsy when he thought she was ahead, and now he gave over $1.5 million to Christine a few weeks ago because he thought she was ahead. Okay, so that's basically someone outside the state of Oregon buying the vote, because these women can pay $60,000 for one 30-second TV ad. I'm sorry, I don't have that kind of money.
Wow.
And I was only given 2 months to run this election. I have no campaign manager per se, okay? And I do have a treasurer, and I have a lot of people behind me, but I had no campaign manager. So I had to set up many of my own radio interviews with people who reached out to me and said, "We heard about you." So the guy in Portland, he reached out to me, and he actually wrote a really nice article. There was only a couple little things in there that was not quite accurate, but it wasn't something that upsets me. It was very good, actually, what he wrote. I have another person in Eastern Oregon that met me a couple of days ago, heard that I was in town, and he jumped in his truck with his camera, and he came over, and we did a 40-minute interview, and it's going to be published in a newspaper. I also have a guy down in Texas that reached out to me today, and he actually did an interview with me over the phone, and he's going to put it out on a podcast, I think. And then there's yourself who's going to put this up, hopefully on YouTube.
That's the plan, yeah. Yeah, it's going to be an audio video.
Yeah, I love YouTube. There's things about YouTube I absolutely love.
I do too.
I go to on a regular basis. And one of my favorite programs used to be, Bill O'Reilly and Glenn Beck, not any longer. I still like Steve Hilton. And believe it or not, I really care for Levine. I don't know what happened to Judge, what was her name? Judge. Janine, I think it was. I haven't heard much from her at all. But one of my favorites, I used to watch Newsmax. I love One American News. So I'm strongly encouraging people to go to One American News. If you have DirecTV or Dish Network, I think it's on one of those. Otherwise, you have to pay extra. One American News is what I consider the most patriotic of the news channels that there is out there. One American News, I love you. Kurt of Turning Point USA. I met a young man up at Eastern Oregon University at LeGrand, my alma mater. He met with me there a few weeks ago when I was on the campaign trail, and he's trying to get up a Turning Point USA there at LeGrand at Eastern Oregon University. He's getting a lot of pushback from the liberals, the wokeism, the Marxist agenda. But, he's a young man that's determined that he wants to make sure that everybody has a voice.
Nice.
So I'm really hoping that we're going to be able to continue this relationship. Tell your wife that I say salamat po. Okay, can you do that for me?
Yes, I will absolutely do that. Thank you very
Tell her
much.
that sight unseen, I say mahal na mahal kita.
Nice, nice. That's great. And I will definitely let her know that. Thank you very much. I'm going to end this call. It's been like over a couple of hours, so I got some work
Two
to do.
hours, two
Yeah,
hours, 50 minutes, and 55 seconds.
yeah, exactly. Great. Thank you, Donis, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much. And if
Yes.
people want to find out more about me, I will be back one day doing my international radio talk show again. It will be called the Concord Show again, like the Battle of Concord and Lexington. And
Okay.
I don't know if I'll be using still the AKA Nandi Plume of Maggie Rose or Maggie Rose McGrath, or if I'm going to come back just as me, myself, and I, Donice Smith. That's left to be seen for the future.
Great. Awesome. Thank you, Donis. We'll talk to you
Thank you.
soon. Bye.
Bye.